Welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're moving on to the next episode in my category breakdown series, and in today's video we're taking a look at cinematography. Now if you're new to this series, I'm going to put this video in a playlist with all of the other episodes in the category breakdown series, but pretty much all this is just every video we're taking a look at a different individual category at the upcoming Academy Awards, and we're talking about all 5 of the nominees, talking about the films in general, what about the films makes it why it got nominated in this specific category. And then we're also going to talk about the specific people that were nominated with that category. So in today's video, we're taking a look at all of the cinematographers, and then just talking a little bit about their bio and their previous work history, different films that they have worked on. And then at the end of each segment, I'm going to give you my personal ranking for how I would rank the nominees, and then my prediction for how likely it is that I think they win the Academy Award on March 15th. So without further ado, let's take a look at the nominees.
Frankenstein.
Cinematography by Dan Laustsen. This is Dan Laustsen's 3rd Oscar nomination, with all 3 being for Guillermo del Toro films. He was nominated for Nightmare Alley in 2022 and for The Shape of Water in 2018. Frankenstein is nominated for Best Cinematography at the BAFTA Awards, the Critics' Choice Awards, and the American Society of Cinematographers. Now, oftentimes I do think that cinematography is one of those categories that I think oftentimes does kind of pair pretty well with production design. Those are 2 categories that I kind of look at. The way that your sets and everything looks good usually means that there was good cinematography on top of it to really kind of accentuate the things that really stand out, the highlights, the high points of the production design. And so for me, when I think about the cinematography of Frankenstein, a lot of the scenes that I remember, I mean obviously a lot of it is kind of the outdoor scenes, but a lot of it is the scenes that are kind of highlighting specifically beautiful parts of the production design. So, I remember there are, kind of the opening scene really, of when the boat is stuck in the ice and everyone's trying to get it out, and the camera's kind of panning, and it kind of pans to that whole kind of the flat snow area as you see, the creature, Frankenstein's monster, really kind of coming in to approach. Again, that whole set, that whole moment is just kind of beautifully shot. And there's a whole lot of other kind of just establishing shots of, again, these fancy, these manors or these castles, these extravagant kind of buildings that a lot of these scenes are taking place in. And again, the establishing shots from the outside are all beautifully well done. But then it's the same thing, and this is what I think kind of goes along with the production design a little bit more, is when you go inside those rooms, when you go inside the buildings, and you're getting this beautiful room where it's all laid out and it's got all the set decoration, and again it's really kind of the gothic vibe that they're going for. And I think that the cinematography is really what is playing a key part in that as well. It is shot in a way that again is really kind of highlighting a lot of those features of the production design, and that's what to me really kind of is what stands out. There's also multiple scenes of just when Dr. Frankenstein is working, the way that the light kind of is coming through the window in the lab in some of those scenes. But then of course there's kind of the big scene with him, with Oscar Isaac's character and Christoph Waltz's character in that lab, where it is kind of set at nighttime, so you're not really getting kind of all that light. But even then, I guess technically you're kind of getting the moonlight coming in and still highlighting it in a way that is still beautiful to look at. There's just a lot, again, with the shots of inside these rooms where it is really kind of goes, I think, hand in hand with the production design, and for me that's kind of the highlight of the cinematography for Frankenstein. For my personal ranking, I'm putting Frankenstein in 3rd, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in 4th.
Marty Supreme.
Cinematography by Darius Khondji. This is Darius Khondji's 3rd Oscar nomination. He was nominated for Evita in 1997 and for Bardo, False Chronicle of a Handful of Truths in 2023. Marty Supreme is nominated for Best Cinematography at the BAFTAs and the American Society of Cinematographers. Now, I might kind of sound like a broken record on a couple of these because pretty much the entirety of this category, I guess there's one, but almost the entirety of this category that's nominated here was also nominated in production design, so it all seems like it all kind of comes hand in hand for a lot of these films. And so there are going to be a couple things here when we're talking about Marty Supreme where it does kind of feel like we're kind of talking about the production design again, because there's a lot of shots that are just, again, the beautiful kind of establishing shots of the outside of the buildings, specifically the street. that Marty, and this is another part of the cinematography that we can talk about now as well, is the scene where Marty is kind of sprinting down that street, and so you're kind of getting brief looks at some of those buildings, but in that specific scene, it's a lot of just great cinematography of tracking Marty as he's running for his life away from the cops down the street. But then there's also some other shots where he is kind of outside the scene where Tyler the Creator is dropping him off at kind of the table tennis parlor, and you get kind of the wide pulled up kind of angle of that street of as he's getting off, and I think that's beautifully shot. But then there is a lot of it again that's kind of the same thing where it's inside going hand in hand with that production design. There's a lot of the shots at kind of when they're at the bowling alley when they're doing their hustling game. A lot of that is shot so well, and it really kind of makes you feel like you're in this establishment, like you're in the 50s in New York in a bowling alley where table tennis is such an important kind of today if you're going to like a bowling alley, it's all arcade stuff. That's kind of the additional thing that you can go and do is kind of play those arcade games. This really makes you feel like the way that it's shot and the way that it's all set in this room makes you feel like this feels like a common place that you're in a lot of a bowling alley / table tennis kind of combo. So I think that's very well done. There's also a lot of just kind of really cool shots that this film does. Specifically, one of the scenes that I remember pretty vividly is the shot of Odessa Zion's character when she's in the car, and Penn, I can't think of, maybe his character doesn't even have a name. But when he's pulling up, when they're like looking for the dog, and you kind of get the cool shot of again from outside the car as she's kind of looking back through like the windshield. I think that's shot very well. I mentioned this again also in my production design video, but I think that this specific scene, when I mentioned in that, I think it fits better in the cinematography video. But again, another scene with Odessa Zion and Timothée Chalamet when they're at that they're not at a gas station. They're at like I think they're at the car lot, but they're making that phone call from that phone booth, and you get like the neon green light from above that's kind of pointing down, and that's what's kind of lighting the scene a little bit kind of into that phone booth. I think that was just beautifully shot. And then also what Marty Supreme has that none of these other films have this. I guess there's another one that kind of is close, but what Marty Supreme has more so is a whole lot of action cinematography. It's got a whole lot of sports. It's got a whole lot of the table tennis games, doing an excellent job of filming those, and really in a couple of scenes, especially kind of the last scene at the end, really making the table tennis feel very high stakes, and the camera work is what's really kind of selling you on a whole lot of it, making you really understand some of the, if it was like a set camera and you're just watching this table tennis game and you're seeing kind of the shots kind of bounce all over, but it's not necessarily like the camera's not moving, maybe you're not getting a great sense of how hard of a shot it is or how hard of a recovery it is to go and save a ball that's in play or whatever. But because you're getting this great kind of action camera movement with it that's really kind of capturing a whole lot of the movement, I think that's another highlight as well that really kind of puts Marty Supreme in terms of this category almost in its own category. And that's the thing, that if that's what they're looking for, then maybe Marty Supreme has some sort of long shot chance at kind of pulling through in the category, but ultimately I don't think that's really in the cards for it. For my personal rank, I'm putting Marty Supreme in 5th, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in 5th.
One battle after another.
Cinematography by Michael Bowman. This is Michael Bowman's first Oscar nomination. His only other cinematographer credit was on Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza in 2021. One Battle After Another won for Best Cinematography at the BAFTAs and was nominated at the Critics' Choice Awards and the American Society of Cinematographers. Now, I think One Battle After Another essentially kind of has a pretty good marriage, a pretty good combination of the highlights of the previous two films, where the one big thing that we're going to talk about with One Battle After Another cinematography is like what I was talking about with Frankenstein. It's a lot of the outdoor establishing shots. There's a whole lot of shots in this film because of kind of the area where on the location where they shot this film. There is a lot of this area that is just kind of beautiful first off to look at. We'll talk about that in a second. First, I want to talk about, there are a couple scenes with like at the beginning of the film with kind of the camp that is kind of set up, where they have kind of a lot of the hostages, some of that, that being shot at night. There is a whole lot of kind of, again, the lighting on that scene that looks very beautiful, and really kind of makes certain characters kind of really stand out a little bit more as opposed to some of the characters that are in the dark a little bit more. So there is a lot of kind of that's going on. There's also probably one of my favorite, it's easy to say it's your favorite scene in the movie because it's the longest scene in the movie, but it's essentially the whole, when Leonardo DiCaprio first meets up with Benicio del Toro's character, and they're going through their whole hectic night of doing everything that they're trying to do to get back to their apartment so Bob can charge his phone and find this rendezvous point. But then there's kind of everything when they're escaping from that point. And essentially from that point on, the rest of that scene, because it's at nighttime and there's a lot of, as he's running across the rooftops, I think there's like fireworks or just like the just fire that's in the background that really is kind of creating this cool kind of smoky effect, but also just kind of like the flames in the background as he's running across, that looks really cool. And again, it's kind of shot in this dark but like blue light kind of scene, if I'm remembering it correctly. So I think like that whole scene, that whole sequence is really cool. So there is a kind of like very specific scenes, but I kind of want to go back to a little bit more of kind of just the beauty, like the nature of the outdoor shots. And essentially it really is maybe the final act specifically where you're really getting a great look at just kind of the landscape, and you're getting a look at, because there's a couple different locations based on which character we're currently kind of following. They're all in kind of these different locations, essentially in the same, obviously the same area, but they all get kind of these different looks where Sean Penn's character, Lockjaw, and Chase Infinity's character Willa, where they're kind of together a little bit, and kind of that the handoff scene, kind of the way that's kind of set up against the kind of that the hill or the little mini mountain or whatever that's kind of right next to him, I think is really cool. And then, but then the kind of the big thing is then when you get Bob, kind of Leonardo DiCaprio's character, kind of by himself, where he's kind of out driving this open street, and you're getting a whole lot of really kind of spacious and like beautiful, kind of breathtaking, again, nature that you're looking at, but it's during the most intense scene, and so it's almost like you're like almost hyperventilating, but at the same time you're kind of like seeing this kind of the beauty of this little like desert kind of like area. And so it's kind of really this contrasting emotions there that I think kind of really stand out and stick to you. But then you eventually get to kind of the most important scene, I think, in terms of the cinematography, and it is that chase scene on the hill. The way that is shot with the camera, I have to assume it's the camera's kind of on the front of the car looking out forward, because it totally feels like you're in the camera. It feels like you're in the car and you are going through this hill. You're going the up and down. You're making the turns. And it's just kind of, like I just said, you have to hold your breath really during that scene because of how beautiful it is, but then just how beautifully well it's shot. Like, that is one of those scenes for me that is one of the most impressive pieces of cinematography work, to get that whole sequence, because I think almost like any other movie, if it was shot in a different way, like, it just kind of would be pretty boring, kind of watching this car kind of go up and down, and then you see another car kind of going up and down this hill or whatever. But for them to make the decision to shoot it the way they did, with the camera essentially, I think, either maybe on top of the car, like right on the hood, wherever it is, it's in a spot that makes you really kind of feel every movement as this car is going through. And so I think that's where I talked about, the nature of the Frankenstein, but then kind of the action of Marty Supreme. I think that action right here is where we're getting to the action of One Battle After Another. And so I think it's kind of this marriage, putting them both together, I think is what's really impressive, and what has kind of maybe propelled this to almost like a surprise frontrunner in the category. For my personal ranking, I'm putting One Battle After Another in 4th, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in 1st.
Sinners.
Cinematography by Autumn Durald Arkapaw. This is Autumn Durald Arkapaw's first Oscar nomination. She previously worked with Ryan Coogler on 2022's Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Sinners is nominated for Best Cinematography at the BAFTAs, the Critics' Choice Awards, and the American Society of Cinematographers. Now, Sinners absolutely falls into, I guess technically kind of both categories again, but really the first category, the beautiful nature. I guess not even necessarily nature, but kind of like the outside shots, I think is what's the most beautiful and the most remarkable about Sinners. There are multiple scenes in this, especially, I would say, I mean, the first act of the film is beautiful, but it's a lot of kind of moving and the plot developing and following the characters, and so it's a lot of the cinematography that is just kind of beautifully shot for those specific intimate scenes. But I think the cinematography itself really kind of gets to flourish a little bit in the second and third act a little bit once we kind of get to the juke joint. Again, a whole lot of this film really kind of kicks off and really excels once we get to the juke joint. But there's a lot of scenes, and it almost just starts with the first scene of, I believe the camera is kind of stationary and it's just looking at this house, and that's when Jack O'Connell's character just kind of jumps in front of the camera, jumps in the frame, and is kind of running away. But before then, you get this great, beautiful establishing shot, and then you get everything there. Then you get kind of that whole scene inside the house of I don't know what their characters' names are, but the couple that Jack O'Connell recruits in a sense to his team, his side. Again, don't really want to spoil a lot of these, even though this specific moment's probably already, you kind of know what's going on in Sinners at this point. But then you get a lot of the beauty of, again, everything in the juke joint, but then you get the scene from outside, or all the scenes from outside the juke joint. While the party's kind of going on inside, you get Jack O'Connell and his followers that are all kind of outside in the moonlight. I think a lot of those scenes are just shot kind of beautifully. Essentially every time you cut from the juke joint to outside, it's just beautifully shot with the growing number of people that are kind of joining Jack O'Connell on that side. You also kind of get kind of the beautiful final, not the official final scene, but one of the final scenes, when they're kind of all getting chased out of the juke joint kind of at the end of the film, and they kind of end up in that river, that lake, the pond, whatever it is. Again, all of that's beautiful as the sun is coming up kind of toward the end. So there's a whole lot of that feels like it's this shots that were, again, on this beautiful location, but were very well timed and set for, as soon as we're getting this beautiful sunrise, as soon as we're getting light that is kind of reflecting off of certain characters, and so you're kind of getting this extra little bit of a glow through the natural sunlight, I think is all beautifully done. And Sinners as well is another one of those that I think essentially in most categories for most films, there's like a specific scene or a specific moment where you're like, this is where it earned its nomination in any specific category. Obviously, the I Lied to You sequence is really kind of, I mean, in terms of that, kind of sealed, I think, the nominations for a lot of different things like editing and sound and song, obviously. But I think it also kind of, the cinematography of that scene is so beautifully done. This kind of one-shot scene as the camera is kind of moving through, and you're seeing all these different decades of black music, and you're kind of getting this whole kind of beautiful scene that is just continuing and going, and it just like going and going. It's like maybe like a 5-minute scene in this. It's a big one take, and you're seeing everyone dance, and you're seeing everyone, the choreography of everything that's going on. It's all again just so highlighted beautifully by the cinematography, and then you get the final shot of the roof burning on the juke joint. And the camera, the way that it is capturing that. And again, that's another one of those moments where it's kind of both, where you're getting this beautiful moment inside, you're seeing the roof burn, and then it does the cut out to Jack O'Connell's character, and he's also witnessing this. So you get to see it from kind of like the inside looking up at the roof on fire, then you get to see it from the outside, and it's just beautifully shot both ways. There's a whole lot of this. Again, that's kind of the one specific scene for me that I think is what really sealed it, but there's just a lot of moments in this film that is just full of beautiful cinematography. For my personal ranking, I'm putting Sinners in second, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in third.
And Train Dreams.
Cinematography by Adolfo Veloso. This is Adolfo Veloso's first Oscar nomination. He previously worked with Clint Bentley on 2021's Jockey. Train Dreams won for Best Cinematography at the Critics' Choice Awards. It also was nominated at the BAFTAs and the American Society of Cinematographers. Now, Train Dreams, to me, in this category, is one of the most interesting and fascinating stories, because, again, you can tell, but this being the final film, you can tell, you already know where I'm putting it in my personal ranking, you already know where I'm putting it in my prediction. To me, even before the Critics' Choice Awards, again, I hadn't seen this film before the Critics' Choice Awards, but what I knew about this film going in was just that it was so beautifully shot. And then, that's the one thing I knew about it. So I kind of like always had this as my front runner. Then the Critics' Choice Awards happened, and it wins there. And then it just kind of stopped. It stopped winning cinematography awards, and to me that is one of the most baffling because this felt like one of the most locked, essentially, categories for me was Train Dreams in cinematography because it is just so beautiful. And this is the couple times that I've talked about Train Dreams on the channel, whether it be in my top 10 of the year video or just my best picture crash course video, or I guess I talked about it as well in my Letterboxd 4 2025 release video. So I've talked about it a couple times, and every single time I've talked about it, there's two things I point out about the film that are beautiful and excellent, and why I love the film. And it's William H. Macy's performance is the first thing, and the second thing is the cinematography. It is the way this film is shot with it has the different aspect ratio, which I'm now just realizing I probably should have pointed this out earlier, that we just won an entire category that doesn't have any black and white nominees, which does seem kind of strange. The Oscars usually does that. But this is maybe the next closest thing. If it doesn't have any black and white, but it does have the different aspect ratio, the way a lot of these scenes are framed, because it has to be shot in a way that is going to fit into that aspect ratio. But it's also kind of, it very feels, this is another thing that I should have mentioned maybe with Marty Supreme, but I'll mention it here for kind of both of them. The way that it's shot to make it feel like it's this period piece, it feels very, almost not grainy footage, but it feels like you're watching a movie that's a little bit set in an older time. It's not, doesn't have such a modern feel to it as you're watching this period piece. And again, so much of Train Dreams, this is 100% like, there's essentially no real action cinematography here. There's no sports, there's no racing. I guess technically there is kind of a flying scene at the end of the movie. There is like a little airplane scene, but for the most part, and there's some train stuff, so there is like some transportation cinematography, but again, for the most part, and essentially 100% why this film got nominated, it is the nature. It's the beauty of the establishing shots of the houses. Inside the houses, again, kind of the same thing, the set decoration that is highlighted by the cinematography, but mostly it's the outdoors nature, and then it's all of the, drawing a blank on his name, Joel Edgerton, as this character is going out and he's building the railroads, and he's doing everything that's outside in these big, beautiful, tall trees and green grass and just beautiful nature that is just so highlighted and captured so breathtakingly beautifully through the cinematography. It is just a work of art, masterclass in cinematography. And it's also has a lot of kind of the same thing. I'm now noticing that there's a lot of fire, almost makes for like a good cinematography. You get a lot of cool shots when there's fire, and there's a couple sequences with fire. The way that that's all shot is beautiful. This is maybe also a little bit more of an editing thing, but there's also a lot of kind of sequences in this film that are kind of like really chopped up, and it's quick flashes of a lot of things, but obviously so it almost feels like it's more of an editing highlight, but again, they're all very rapid fire, beautiful different shots, so in a sense it also is highlighting the cinematography of the film. This is one that, again, I think Train Dreams, it's almost shocking to think that it's not just the runaway in this category, because I think if you ask anyone who's seen the film, the cinematography is going to be the highlight. It's going to be the thing that a lot of people talk about. And, maybe there is still a world where something can happen and it can kind of pull off an upset. But at this point, I think One Battle After Another has kind of taken over as the front runner in the category, and it feels like it's pulling away. But almost no other nomination, no other win would make me as happy as on Oscar night as this would if this is able to pull off the cinematography win. For my personal ranking, I'm putting Train Dreams in first, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in second. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of the nominations. Who are you rooting for to win? Who are you predicting to win? And then also maybe who's your dark horse in the category, if you think there's some shot that Marty Supreme or Sinners or I guess Frankenstein would be kind of, those are like the three maybe that are the big dark horses in the category. If you think there's a shot that any of them have at pulling off the victory, let me know all of that down below in the comments. And if you'd like to like this video and then subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes in my category breakdown series, or just any of the other series that I have going on my channel, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.